Hey, welcome back to A Twin Flame Path. I'm Jacqueline, and yeah, today's video is kind of a spur of the moment situation. Didn't really feel like doing too much. Really just felt like going to bed, watching something or playing some game, which I probably will do later. But before I retreat into that mode, um, I wanted to I went through my archives and I stumbled upon one of my notes, and it was, how am I qualified to talk about these things? Like, what makes me qualified to have an opinion that people should listen to about any of these things, right? Like, who are you? Who am I? And I have a few opinions about some things, and I want to give a little bit of my personal backstory, which will, I believe, prove to be at least somewhat entertaining. So, let's just get this ball rolling. Excuse me for a second. Oh, it's still hot. I thought I gave it time, but I guess it's just still simmering. But anyway, so the backstory of me is, when I was really little, I was exposed to things. A lot of things. Some of them I won't get into, because it's a little like too much viewer discretion advised type situation. Um, too raw and uncut. So from 0 to 5, though, I had a very turbulent and abusive and violent childhood. I was born into a family that went into a marriage with a lot of problems, right? Or two people that went into a marriage with a lot of problems. And that's cool. But these problems kind of led to other problems through the years. And we'll get into that later. But when I was little, I had very violent parents. I don't want to go into the details of them because I don't talk about them much. I don't have much of an opinion of anymore. And that leads me to my first point, my first twin flame point, is that sometimes us twin flames go through extreme situations with our nuclear families, or just the families that we were born into, My family now is great. The family I was born into, they're always shrouded in secrets, and it was a very cult-like environment. And along with the violence that was in the house and the stress that was there because of one of my parents' jobs, there was also there were also spirits in the house that we lived in that were experienced by nuclear family before I was born, and of course after I was born too, and because we were in that house for 9 years, and things would move. Like, I was a baby, but the stories that I've heard from siblings, one sibling, I have one sibling, and one blood sibling, and also parents people from the extended family that would come to visit. Like, it was like a 3-story Victorian house, and it was in a place where there was a war. And so my mom used to tell me about how she saw like a soldier dressed in like the Gettysburg, I guess whatever they wore in the Gettysburg War, because it was around that area. And, if you look online, there's a lot of hauntings in that area. A lot of soldiers died, and the soldier visited her. And there would be kids that would pull on her clothes, and she would think it was me and think, hey, she's in a crib. I'm like 8 months or something like that. And then she would hear the kid running down the hall and laughing, and the doors would close. And there was a time that my uncle came to visit, and he was staying on the 3rd floor. And, he, and I think my sister as well, witnessed, or maybe it was just my sister, but there were 2 occurrences up there that I distinctly remember, because there were a lot of stories, but I think the ones I'm going over are like the main like point of them. My dad's office was up there, and the lights in his office turned on and off. At the same time, the phone would ring. At the same time, the computer turned on and off, and the keys on the typewriter or the keys of the keyboard of the computer were typing, and it was just a lot going on at one time, TV going on and off. And another time, there was this giant trunk, like maybe 3 feet long or so, maybe a little bit bigger, and about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet maximum height and width, that kind of dimensions of a trunk. And it was heavy, and it moved from one side of the floor to the other. There was a woman who appeared in a doorway, and she was dressed all in black. And then my mom turned around and saw her again, and she was dressed in white. The people that lived there before us were killed, and the protocol that was happening was that my mom told my dad that they needed to get the house exorcised or blessed or whatever, have some kind of person come in with salt and sage and smudge that place out. So I experienced repetitive nightmares when I was there. I experienced some things once I got older, but I would spend all my time hiding under the cover. And the violence that was there were like a lot of really intense beatings from my dad. And I would always wonder, why is he only beating me? But that's that other part that I just let go, right? It's not really for YouTube, So, but I would be running and really terrified and hiding and just crazy, terrified 4-year-old, 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 16-year-old. But like back at that time, it was just me like running away. So I'd spend a lot of time underneath the blankets, and I had nightmares, which I realized later were more than nightmares. But I had the same nightmare over and over and over again for like 12 years. And it was a dark harbor, and I was running from somebody who wanted to kill me. And I experienced that for like years. So that leads me to my next point. A lot of association with the spirit world, starting from that age, but never stopping. And I won't go into a lot of things because a lot of things are just private, and my mom, she and her family are very esoteric. My mom practices a form of witchcraft or voodoo. She won't ever tell you that's what it is. And she sure will be watching every evangelical Christian TV show on TV at the same time. But things always seem fishy. And I remember my sister saying, I think that this family is cursed. And I think that was crazy. That was before I even started exploring a lot of topics. But that leads me to my third point. Some cultures go into some realms more than others. Now, my mom's culture doesn't necessarily beeline straight there. But my mom is kind of the black sheep of the family. So she was pretty much disowned by them, and she went on her own avant-garde way. And yeah, I didn't really learn about her witchcrafty ways until about 30 years later. So we won't go into that, but let's just say that I learned by being on the front lines. And you learn the closest about your enemy, the most about your enemy when you're the closest to them. So when I got back into her house years later, I noticed that there were some strange occurrences. And then I started having these spiritual encounters. And this is after my initial ascension. But rewind back. Let me not get too off topic. Back in the house, there was stress from my dad's job. My dad's been with IBM since 75. And I was born in 80. And if you notice the layoffs that IBM has had, those always affected our family adversely. It wasn't until my dad became very Christian in the mid-90s that he changed his ways, like completely. But before then, it was a bumpy road, right? But you would never know that now. So, and I don't put that out there to put his business out there, but what I have learned is that this is my business. So back to the 80s. My stories tend to be like flip-flop, back, forth, but, you know. So in like 85, 86, we had neighbors that were from Romania, and it was a man and his wife and their mother-in-law, and they were painters. And my background is I'm a painter, I'm an artist. I retreated into art as a result of all of these things and the continued abuse and turbulence that was in the home. But who I learned to paint and draw and about art from were my neighbors. And they lived directly, if you're facing the street, the house directly right of us. And they were elderly, in their 80s and 90s, somewhere in there. And I considered them at the time to be my best friends. I didn't really have friends. So they were like my best friends because they were like artists and they were like my friends. And the other friends that I had were like animals and nature and stuff. And that leads me to another point. A lot of time in nature will do something to your mind. And after we moved from one state, my dad's job transferred us to another state, and I've spent consecutive years, hours on end, almost every single day in a forest by myself. And I feel like that had an impact. But we'll get back to that later because that extends back to the heritage situation. So in 86, my neighbors, right? So my neighbors lived directly on the right side of our house. I was in a cove of trees and you couldn't see me because it was sunny outside and in the cove of trees it was shady. But I could see my neighbor come outside, the man of the house, the only guy who lived there. His name was Edward. He came outside, and on the right of their house was my sister's, I think, best friend and her brother. And so I didn't know them. I was too little. I was 5, maybe 5.5. And so I knew he was like the boy from the other house. So I see him coming across the yard, and Edward comes out to intersect him. And I noticed that they went inside. And I remember thinking, that's so weird because they don't hang out together. You know, it's like they're not friends. Like, just that was what was going through my mind. Like, you know, what's he doing with them? You know? So I remember like a little while later, my mom calls from the house because I was outside alone. And she said, "Have you seen Edward?" And I felt like that was strange because the timing of it all. And she didn't talk to Edward like that. Like, they babysat me like one time, but that was like it. Like, otherwise, like, they didn't have this close relationship. So that's just a whole other story. But so I said, yeah, he went inside with that boy. So my mom takes me and we go in the house. And I just remember blood being everywhere. And yeah, from what I remember, we found the bodies. The boy had beaten them with some sort of wrench or something, and then he hacked them to death with a butcher knife. And he wound up killing the other two because he didn't realize that they were home. I didn't realize that until earlier this year because I looked up the news article. I just looked up the news article like less than 2 months ago. But I never knew that he killed the other two because he didn't realize that they were there. So my mom and I find the bodies, and I remember getting interviewed by the news, and it was just a lot, you know. And so that leads me to my next point. When you witness death early, when you witness certain kinds of abuse early and traumas, when you witness a lot of those things early, it kind of changes your perspective. Not saying that people who don't experience these things can't be, you know, whatever it is that they are, because that's totally not true. But we're just talking about me here on this channel, Twin Flame Path. So that's that. So, yeah, so the daughter came out and she was throwing away all their paintings. And my mom went to the trash and she took all the paintings, and she was also throwing out their paintbrushes. And I still have their paintbrushes now. I don't really paint with them too much anymore because, you know, bristles get old and some of them were dried, but I always kept them, and I always kept their paintings, and for the most part. And that kind of, I think, was a bridge as well, because I always felt like protectors around me. And I never really acknowledged their death and started trying to acknowledge it until like the past, like recent years. So, when I did that, I realized that they never left me. That was after having experiences of all kinds, you know, like coming close to dying in car accidents. In that house as well, we were robbed while we were inside. And then my dad's Cadillac was stolen, and I remember riding in the car with him and opening up the glove compartment and finding a knife on the inside. So that all happened in Pittsburgh, which was where we were living. And then we lived upstate New York, and that's where I spent all my time in the forest. And those 4 years were like the most peaceful of my life, pretty much, up until now. You know, even though the past few years have been hard, they've been peaceful because I let go. And just to make a long story short, I let go because I stopped making excuses for the people in my family, my nuclear born into family, you know. I stopped. My mom went through a lot of abuse when she was younger. You know, my grandma, she came up from Jamaica to Canada, but then she wound up contracting polio and getting put in a wheelchair, and then she got bacterial meningitis and she lost her hearing. And then my mom and her twin brother were put into foster care from like really young ages, and then their older brother was separated, and her other older sister she was deprived of oxygen at birth, and so she had brain damage and and she was the one that stayed with my mom's family. So her dad was Native, Irish, and French Canadian. And that leads me to my nationality kind of cultural thing. I believe that certain cultures embrace the spirit realm more than others. Like here in the States, there's like spirituality, and you have people who are like awakening and studying ascension and chakras and stuff like that. But all that, from what I understand, came from South Asia. And so here, you have the natives, and the native way for me is on both sides. My dad was adopted, and he'll never really admit it, but he is Native and Black. The Cherokee region, he was, in the South. And so what tribe exactly? It's not Cherokee. Well, it could be, but it's really the land that he's from. So I could go into detail about that, but I'll just leave it to the region. And then my mom's dad is Sioux Dakota. And, her mom coming from Jamaica, they were, from what I understand, indigenous Jamaicans, because the indigenous people that were living there were all killed off, and they're thought to be extinct now. So, but they have their ways. My mom used to tell me about her aunt who used to warn her from the other side. She used to smell her perfume. And, when a guy was about to do something to my mom while she was sleeping, she smelled her perfume and it woke her up. She's seen visions and had all these types of experiences. And, with that family, they have their thing going on, which is very cool, because the family, in my opinion, is very cool. My mom just went AWOL. So, yeah. And then, my dad and him and his bloodline, I feel like that's how they connected. And I feel like, well, I'll just leave it at that. But, Native on both sides, being in nature, that kind of spirituality, I just felt it in my blood from a really early age. And I kind of had to fight for it. I tried joining tribes, but my mom being in Canada and me being American, I really couldn't do it that way. And down here, at least with the Cherokee, you have to be on the Dawes roll. And my dad is like tight-lipped about his background, and he won't really talk about it. So that's how I went on my own to try to find people that were of my grandfather's tribe. So, and I did. And it was and is very cool. And I appreciate it very much. So down in Jamaica also, they, from what I understand, came from India. And you just feel these connections, especially growing up. You see stuff, and then you start growing up and you start saying, like, that's what my mom did. That's what I do, like, naturally. Like, I naturally like this. We get along. Like, what's going on, And then you find out, it's like through pictures and the family keeping a dialogue going. And one thing about my mom is she's very proud of that whole heritage. So I grew up like learning about it, all that kind of stuff. Long story, but let's just say that there's a lot going on with the bloodlines. And going back to the heritage and stuff, I feel like, over in Ireland, I feel like they have their thing going on. I mean, there's just a lot. So I won't go into it too much, because it kind of gets into like, oh, these people do this and these people do that. And I just know what I feel. I know what I've experienced. It's like I'm coming from my place. But I won't go on it too long, because talking about it just gets you to this point where it just sounds like stereotyping. And that's not where I'm trying to go. It doesn't apply to all people, but, fundamentally, like, some things are just apparent, at least from what I can say from my experiences. So fast forward to us moving from New York again to another region because of my dad's job. And things were kind of quiet, you know. But then I started wanting to understand things. I remember having a book about transcendental, what was the name of the book? It was about astral projection, but it had a different title. And my dad found the book and he told me it was devil worship. And so I was like scared, you know. It's like, whoa, you know, because in the Southern Baptist Church, you know, that's where my dad like dug his roots in. He would tell me a lot of things were devil worship. So I had it in my soul, like I wanted to explore these things. And I continued having like experiences that I would feel but ignore, because back in Pittsburgh, I just asked the whole spirit world to like leave me alone because I was too afraid. And throughout my years, I feel like, you know, that was why I felt things and felt like I experienced things, but really didn't experience too much. So my dad found that book, told me it was devil worship, but around that time is also when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior and went to church a lot and prayed a lot and read the Bible a lot. And I prayed a lot. And that leads me to my next point. Like, no matter what you believe in and stuff, like prayer and meditation, they're like forms of one another, I think. But things I do now are through Jesus Christ. So, like, I don't fish from some pond that I don't know what's in it. So, but, you know, I feel like that leads me in the right direction. But it also kept me, like, afloat, because during those times, you know, like, it was just rough. So then there was just family stuff that happened. Really, the main stuff started simmering down. And, you know, went off to college, graduated, and then from there just lived my life for a few years. And there were some very substantial things that happened. Spent more time outside, and I'll just leave it at that. But fast forward to me being in a situation where I needed an answer. And that's where everything from the backdrop came to the foreground, right? Like, all of these experiences started to surface. And I started, and I can discuss these techniques in another video, but I started looking for ways of activating my pineal. You know, I started researching meditation and found out about the pineal gland. So from there, I did things to change my diet. And then I started watching the sunrise and the sunset every single day for the entire duration. Like, and I'm talking about like sometimes 2 hours both ways, you know, because I was in a situation where I needed to leave where I was before the sun came up because it was an abusive situation. So I was afforded the luxury of being able to do that. I also started listening to binaural beats a lot. And then I noticed I was going through this like mad ascension, like, but I didn't know it was ascension until I started researching like it and the side effects and stuff like that. And then I realized what I was doing, and I was able to monitor it like more closely. And then all the truth started to surface. And then I was introduced to my twin flame. So, but he's more than a twin flame to me. Like, I don't know. Maybe twin flame is what it is, but yeah. But we'll just leave it at that for video's sake. But yeah. So we were introduced, and that was like the most pivotal point of my life, you know. I've had experiences with a lot of things, you know, like stuff with space, stuff with the afterlife, stuff with being a medium, and some of it has been very extreme, you know. But thank God I have an awesome family that has been very supportive, and an exceptionally supportive twin flame that is so brilliant and so smart, and wow, you know, like it's like he's held my hand through all of it, and he's the best mentor ever. So I'm really thankful because, like, wow, wouldn't, wow, without, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, without him, I don't know, I just don't want to ever be without him. So I'm just happy that we found each other again. And, you know, during those times, I also had experiences with, I didn't even consider reincarnation as being a real thing. Learned about reincarnation, learned about us. It just flip-flopped back and forth, you know, and it continues to do so. And the growing never stops, you know. Around this time is when I started, you know, running into other twin flame people that really helped out, you know. And I can get into them another time. I don't want to, like, leave anybody out, but I think they know who they are. And, you know, then from there I met a girl, and, you know, she saw one of my previous videos, and we became friends, you know, like we're in a soul group together, so it's like soul sisters, you know. So, and she asked me to be a moderator in a twin flame group, and it's still going very well, but she and I both left the group. It just wasn't a good fit. It became something else. It basically just had some things that just weren't my style, and like tarot cards came up and people's opinions, and it was just more like, I don't really belong here anymore. But that gave a lot of experience as well, as far as listening to people and seeing like the flow of how a very dialogue rich group can be, which is really cool. It's a very cool group, very cool people, nothing like hard, you know, ill will or something like that. It's just, I'm exceptionally sensitive, like, that leads me to the next one. Super sensitive, super empathetic. Animals, people, Reiki, learned about that, didn't even know really, and then I practiced it and ran experiments, you know, like not ran experiments, but people who I knew were sick, I would just, you know, focus my intentions on trying to help them feel better without them really knowing, you know, because some people don't believe sometimes and think it's all wild craziness. So had some successes with that, you know, continue to I've had people, like, just a lot, like people who passed come to deliver messages, and when I tell the person that they're for, you know, they're like, man, you don't even know. And that's very cool, because when you're calling up somebody and you don't talk to this person, and you're telling them that a loved one of theirs has something to say from like the other side, like, it can be a bit squirrely feeling on one end, you know, because you don't want to offend this person. And then you think in the back of your mind, like, is this for real? But then when you get some confirmation, it helps. Yeah, I don't like admitting that confirmation helps, but I'm still there. I don't know. So, but I think I've kind of touched on everything. I haven't gone through everything, but that's pretty much a good summary of things that kind of point me to being somewhat well qualified for this situation. I won't go into detail about my TF and I, because that's private, and that's kind of another one of my videos, but I'll go ahead and talk about it here because that won't be a really long one. Keeping things between you and your twin flame. Now, there have been times where I've been more public with things and I've spoken out more about things that have happened between he and I, or really things that I'm confused about, and I get hurt really easily. Like, I am paper thin when it comes to being hurt. Like, I can survive. I lived in Premier Flats. I lived in MacArthur Park. Then there's that whole other situation when I was 0 to 5. You know, I've been around. Like, been around. So, you know, this is not my first rodeo when it comes to like this battle royale type stuff. But my feelings get hurt really seriously, easily. So, yeah. And most of the time I'm having a misunderstanding about something and I just want to run. I just want to say, fuck this shit. I'm out, you know, like, but I don't, because I'm very good with being devoted, but I'm so afraid of being hurt. Like, it's unreal. And I have to like work on that. That's one of my, fuck. Have me cursing over here on a Saturday night. But like, that's one of my, I wouldn't say tragic flaws, but that's one of my biggest obstacles. So, you know, what I've come to do is learn that keeping stuff to yourself is good. And what I did notice is that places that I would read people talking about their twin, you just have a lot of opinions that come in, and like, you're getting an opinion here, but try not to go too far into like your twin being wrong or you being right, or vice versa, or this is what you should do, or you shouldn't do this, and go find your inner goddess and just leave them behind. You know, like, I'm not here to say like anything like that. I'm not with it. It's not really my style. I am about finding self-confidence, you know, because part of it is kind of like, you want to be with me, you know, like, wow. And my confidence will be shattered because I'm like, you are the only ideal. You are. And for me, you know, like, and a little bit about that backstory, I'm hypersensitive. Like, I don't know if these things made me into that kind of person, but I was always a sensitive child. I was always really in tune with like animals and nature, and kind of socially awkward. Right? You know, so, but yeah, keeping stuff between you and your twin flame, for the most part, I think is very helpful. Talking about it with trusted people, or saying stuff that you're inclined to, that you feel comfortable about talking about, or comfortable with talking about, you know, I think that's all good. But like trashing them and, you know, talking about their whatever, yeah, not really with that. So I really won't go into stuff that happens between us. I might touch on something, but most of it's going to be like on my side, because, you know, not the next video, but one of the upcoming videos is going to be about how the experiences that people have with their twin are like mirrors of one another, you know, like, what's happening with you could also be happening with them, like, in a way that is distinctly similar. And it tends to show in the circumstances that you guys experience ultimately together, because everything is together. So look for that video. But who knows if it'll be coming up next. But with that being said, this summarizes this video. This is a super long one, and which leads me to my next point. I'm really sorry about the delay in captions and subtitles. The ones that generate automatically, hey, for auto generation, pretty good. But look for the CC for the ones that I put up. They're pretty funny, I think, because I say and like, and you know so much. It's probably like half the stuff that I say. But yeah, just look for that. But sometimes I just get excited about making a video, so one might come out before another one gets subtitled properly. But they all will be subtitled. So just enjoy in the meantime, I hope. But on that note, I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that everybody is making it through and feeling good and, you know, reaching new heights in understanding. And it'll all be okay, right? Yeah. So on that note, I'm going to go immerse myself into something because I still feel like tantruming. And if you feel like tantruming, just immerse and hopefully you'll rise to the surface feeling pretty good. So on that note, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.